A forced migration, the transatlantic slave trade. The transatlantic slave trade stands as one of history's most horrific chapters. Millions of Africans were forcibly removed from their homelands and subjected to unimaginable brutality. This essay focuses on the trade to mainland North America, a period spanning over 2 centuries from 1628 to 1860. During this time, approximately 470,000 Africans were captured and forced onto slave ships bound for the colonies. Of those, only an estimated 390,000 survived the treacherous journey across the Atlantic, known as the Middle Passage. These survivors arrived on American shores to face a life of forced labor and oppression. They were treated as property, denied basic human rights, and subjected to a system designed to exploit their labor for the economic gain of European colonists. By the time the transatlantic slave trade was outlawed in the United States in 1808, the institution of slavery was deeply entrenched. Despite the ban on importation, the number of enslaved Africans in the American colonies continued to grow. By 1860, on the eve of the Civil War, there were nearly 600,000 enslaved people in the United States. The transatlantic slave trade had a profound and lasting impact on the demographic landscape of North America, shaping the social, economic, and political fabric of the nation for generations to come. The transatlantic slave trade was not merely a historical event, but a human tragedy of immense proportions. It is essential to remember the countless lives lost and forever altered by this brutal system. Understanding this dark chapter of history is crucial to comprehending the ongoing fight for racial justice and equality in the United States and beyond. The engine of empire's slavery's grip on Europe. The transatlantic slave trade fueled the economies of several European nations, particularly Spain and Portugal. These empires relied heavily on enslaved African labor to cultivate cash crops on plantations in their American colonies. Sugar, tobacco, cotton, and other commodities generated immense wealth for European powers, driving their economic expansion and global dominance. Spain, with its vast colonial holdings in the Americas, was one of the first European nations to engage in the transatlantic slave trade. The Spanish relied on enslaved Africans to work on sugar plantations in the Caribbean and to extract silver from mines in Mexico and South America. The wealth generated from these enterprises helped to finance Spain's military ambitions and solidify its position as a major European power in the 16th and 17th centuries. Portugal, too, played a central role in the transatlantic slave trade. Portuguese traders established sugar plantations in Brazil, which quickly became the world's leading producer of sugar. The immense profits from the sugar trade fueled Portugal's economy and helped to finance its exploration and colonization of Africa and Asia. The reliance of these European powers on enslaved African labor had a profound impact on the development of their economies and their place in the global order. A perilous journey, shipwreck and unexpected allies. The Middle Passage was a harrowing ordeal for the millions of Africans forced onto slave ships. Cramped, unsanitary conditions, disease and starvation were commonplace, resulting in an estimated 15% mortality rate during the transatlantic voyage. Those who survived the journey often arrived in the Americas traumatized and in poor health. One particular incident in 1675 highlights the perils faced by enslaved Africans during the Middle Passage. A slave ship carrying a cargo of captive Africans from the Gold Coast of Africa wrecked off the coast of the island of St. Vincent in the Caribbean. The survivors, many of whom were injured or ill, managed to swim ashore only to encounter the indigenous inhabitants of the island, the Kalinago people. The Kalinago, also known as the Caribs, were a fierce and independent people who had long resisted European attempts at colonization. They had a complex relationship with Africans, sometimes engaging in trade and alliances, but also participating in the slave trade themselves. However, in this instance, the Kalinago chose to show compassion to the shipwrecked Africans. They welcomed them into their communities, providing them with food, shelter, and medical care. Section 4. Seeds of Change. Early African presence in North America. The arrival of Africans in North America predates the traditional start date of the transatlantic slave trade in 1619. Spanish explorers, beginning in the 16th century, brought enslaved Africans with them to the New World. One notable example is the 1526 expedition of Lucas Vázquez de Ayllón, which established a short-lived Spanish colony in present-day South Carolina. This expedition included enslaved Africans, marking one of the earliest documented instances of their presence in what would become the United States. The colony ultimately failed, but the presence of these Africans highlights the long and complex history of African people in North America. English expeditions, too, played a role in introducing Africans to the region. In 1586, Sir Francis Drake, an English explorer and privateer, landed on Roanoke Island off the coast of present-day North Carolina. Drake's fleet included a number of Africans who had been freed from Spanish ships. Some of these Africans chose to remain with Drake's men and sailed back to England, while the fate of others remains unknown. These early encounters with Africans, both free and enslaved, demonstrate that the history of African people in North America is multifaceted and extends far beyond the traditional narrative of the transatlantic slave trade. Section 5. A brutal system, a profound impact, slavery's mark on America. The transatlantic slave trade had a profound and lasting impact on the development of the United States. The forced labor of enslaved Africans generated immense wealth for white slaveholders and fueled the growth of the Southern economy. Slavery became deeply entrenched in the social, economic, and political fabric of the nation. However, the institution of slavery also sparked resistance and rebellion. Enslaved Africans resisted their oppression in countless ways, from everyday acts of defiance to organized revolts. These acts of resistance challenged the legitimacy of slavery and helped to pave the way for its eventual abolition. The legacy of slavery continues to shape American society today. The systematic exploitation and oppression of African Americans during centuries of slavery and segregation have left an enduring mark on race relations, economic inequality, and the criminal justice system. Section 6. Legacies of Resilience, Echoes of the Transatlantic Slave Trade. Despite the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade, Africans demonstrated remarkable resilience and resistance. They maintained their cultural traditions, formed strong communities, and fought for their freedom and dignity. Their legacy lives on in the vibrant cultures, traditions, and contributions of African Americans to the United States and the world. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade is not just about acknowledging a dark chapter in history, but also about recognizing the strength, resilience, and contributions of those who endured it. It is about confronting the lasting consequences of this brutal system and working towards a more just and equitable future for all. The echoes of the transatlantic slave trade reverberate to this day. By remembering and learning from this tragic period in human history, we can work to dismantle the systems of oppression that continue to marginalize and disenfranchise people of African descent. The fight for racial justice and equality is a testament to the enduring legacy of those who endured the unimaginable horrors of slavery and fought for a better future.